Welcome. Welcome to worship from Nora Unitarian Universalist Church in Hanska, Minnesota for Sunday, April 11th, 2021. We're glad you're here. We're glad you're here from your kitchen, your living room, your den. We're glad you're here from across Minnesota and from places farther afield. Though we are still not meeting in our church building, the ongoing expenses of this congregation need to be met through our gifts to it. You may send your pledges and other donations to the church address, which will appear at the end of this church service. The Nora board will meet Tuesday evening. If you have concerns or input to bring before the board, please be in contact with Jeannie Hinsman. In the houses of the holy, the world pauses. In the hearts of the holy, love abides. In the havens of the holy, hope comforts. In the hearths of the holy, spirit refreshes. Come then, one and all, gather in. Come then, one and all, gather here. Bring here all of your heart. Bring here all of your body. Bring here all of your soul. Come then, bring the broken, the vulnerable, the ragged, the outcast, the other. Come then, gather in, come. Come then, one and all, gather in. Come then, gather in. We light our chalice today to celebrate the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to reaffirm the historic pledge of liberal religion to seek that justice which transcends mere legality and moves toward the resolution of true equality, and to share that love which is ultimately beyond even our cherished reason, that love which unites us.
We are gathered in the Spirit, our bodies are apart, filled with joy and touched with wonder, separate hands but mingled hearts, giving thanks and singing praises for the love that calls us on from our many different places. We are gathered into one. We are gathered in our sorrow. We are gathered in our fear, in our pain and in our worry, in our anger and our tears, as we tend to one another with our gifts and with our care. Our community is
All because you matter. Written by Tammy Charles, illustrated by Brian Collier. They say that matter is all things that make up the universe: energy, stars, space. If that's the case, then you, dear child, matter. Long before you took your place in this world, you were dreamed of, like a knapsack full of wishes carried on the backs of your ancestors as they created empires, pyramids, legacies. Building, inventing, working beneath red-hot suns and cold blue moons, thinking of you years ahead, because to them you always mattered. On the night you were born, stars sprayed across the sky, each one full of light, hope, love, and all the moments in your life that would matter. Like your first steps, bare feet planted on cold floor, hobbling, wobbling, toppling, only to stand and try again. Or your first words spoken almost like a lullaby, notes climbing a ladder to the sky, Mama, Papa, Mahal Kita. Or the first time you opened a book, like a mirror staring back at you, and really saw yourself, same hair, same skin, same dreams. The words and pictures coming together like sweet jam on toast, musica blasting through barrios, sun and blue sky, all because you matter. But in galaxies far away, it may seem that light does not always reach lonely planets, covered moons, stars unseen, as if matter no longer exists. And just like moons hidden in the dark, there will be times when you too question your place in the universe. Like the time you'll hear the teacher call your name, Hosam Ozuamaka Jordanus, and the whispers and giggles begin, followed by, what kind of name is that? Or the time you'll see a letter, big, bold, red, on the page, and you'll question if you and your work and your effort matter. Or the time when your pop-pop turns on the news and you see people everywhere. Take a breath. Take a stand. Take a knee. And you hear Pop-Pop's whispered prayers as another name is called. Trayvon, Tamir, Philando. And you wonder if they or you will ever matter. But did you know that you do? Did you know that you were born from queens, chiefs, legends? Did you know that you are the earth, that strength, power, and beauty lie within you? Did you know that you are sun rays, calm like ocean waves, tough like montañas, magic like stars in space? And on the day the universe was created, you were thought of, dreamed of, carried like a knapsack full of wishes as planets, stars, moons took their places, making room for you, your people, their dreams, your future, all because since the beginning of time, you mattered, they mattered, we matter, and always will.
Joy and woe are woven fine, wrote William Blake. And when this we rightly know, safely through the world we go. Because we daily live the truth in the poet's words, we pause each time we gather to worship, wherever and however we gather, to share with this beloved community our joys and our sorrows. I invite you to type your joys and sorrows into the comments on Facebook, to speak them aloud in the space where you are at, to hold them in silence and know that in the mysterious ways of caring and love, we hold your joy and your sorrow with you. Let us hold all our joys and sorrows, those expressed and those left unexpressed, in our hearts as we enter a spirit of meditation. Our words of meditation today, prayer, by Faisal Mahuyuddin. You cleanse the uncovered regions of your body, then stand at the foot of prayer mats facing the Qibla. Unfasten your cluttered mind from the tangible hold of secular trances. Bow down before the cascading glow of God's mercy. Submit to a centripetal course toward the gates of a more perfect emptiness. Here, now, you can plunge into the most secluded chamber of the soul. Commune with your share of the universe's initial burst of light, eternal light, housed within the lamp of mystery, waiting to be beheld 5 times a day. Amen. Our first reading today, an excerpt from 3 to Get Deadly by Janet Ivanovich. In the pages and chapters leading up to this excerpt, the bounty hunter Stephanie is looking for the owner of a corner candy store ice cream shop who has been implicated in the deaths of 8 drug dealers, 4 of whom were found buried in the basement of that corner candy store ice cream shop. I thought it wouldn't hurt to revisit some neighboring houses. Hopefully the climate would be more receptive now that the bodies had been discovered in Mo's basement. Dorothy Rostowski seemed a good place to start. I knocked on her door and waited while kids shouted inside. Dorothy appeared with a spoon in her hand. "Making supper," she said. "You want to come in?" "Thanks, but I've only got a minute. I just wanted to let you know I'm still looking for Mo Biedermeier." I felt the climate shift, and Dorothy's husband came to stand at her side. "There are a lot of people in this community who'd prefer Mo wasn't found," Rostowski said. My stomach clenched, and for a chilling moment I thought he might pull out a gun or a knife or light up a cigarette and threaten me. My mind raced back to the phone call that had lured me to the candy store. Would I have recognized Dorothy's voice on the phone? Would I have recognized Mrs. Molinowski's niece, Joyce, or Loretta Bieber, or my cousin Marjorie? And who were these men who were prepared to burn me and possibly kill me? Fathers of kids like these? Neighbors? Schoolmates? Maybe one of them had been Dorothy's husband. "What we'd really like is for all this to be over so Mo could come back and reopen the store," Dorothy said. "The kids miss him." I had a hard time hiding my astonishment. "Mo's suspected of killing 8 men. Drug dealers," Dorothy said. "That doesn't make it okay." "It makes it better than okay. Mo should get a medal." "Killing people is wrong." Dorothy looked down at the floor, studying a spot just in front of her toe. Her voice dropped. "Theoretically, I know that's true, but I'm fed up with the drugs and the crime. If Mo wants to take matters in his own hands, I'm not going to rain on his parade." "I don't suppose you'd call me if you saw Mo in the neighborhood." Don't suppose I would," Dorothy said, still avoiding my eyes. I crossed the street to talk to Mrs. Bartle. She met me at the door with her arms crossed over her chest. Not good body language, I thought, taking a mental step backward. "Is this about Mo?" she asked. "Because I'm going to tell you up front, if he was running for president, I'd be there right with my vote. It's about time somebody did something about the drug problem in this country." "He's suspected of killing 8 men. Too bad it isn't more. Get rid of every last one of them dope pushers." And our second reading from the Unitarian Universalist World magazine, UU World, by the Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd, Universalism in Practice. Did Michael Brown steal the cigars from the convenience store in Ferguson that day last August? National headlines wrapped themselves around that question as if the answer to it changed anything at all, including the death and the suffering and the loss. I thought then, and I think now, what the hell does it matter in this grand tragedy of national and international pain if the boy stole the cigars? Unitarian Universalists are the inheritors of a dual heretical tradition born from radical branches of Protestant Christianity. We have taken our foundational doctrines in all sorts of innovative directions over the centuries, but our theological heritage remains the same. Unitarianism, one God, not three, not mediated or modified by Jesus or any other prophet, but one God. And Universalism, the unyielding belief that each and every person is endowed with an original blessing that calls them and claims them regardless of circumstance or even of worthiness. Every single person, inherently endowed with worth and dignity. Original blessing for every single person with no categorical exclusions in the least. We are so far removed from the foundational underpinnings of those founding days that it can be difficult to interpret our heritage. But if each and every one is endowed with inherent worth and dignity, then humankind cannot be categorized, and thus whole groups of humankind cannot be dismissed. It is not just one kind of person or one category of persons who are offered every blessing of life and every dignity. It is everyone, whether you deserve it or not, whether you stole the cigars or not. It does not matter. By focusing our national discourse on Michael Brown's perceived culpability or lack thereof, we seem to be asking, as a nation, if he did or did not deserve to die that day. In this nation, we focus not only on whether or not Michael Brown was guilty, but whether or not he was the right kind of young black man. Was he the kind of young black man who deserved to walk free, or was he the kind of young black man that ultimately got what he deserved? In a parallel mode, we ask if a young woman raped on her college campus was the right kind of young woman. Was she wearing fishnet and heels? Did she get drunk at the party? Did she lead him on, we ask, as if to determine once and for all into which category we can sort the beaten, the injured, the oppressed. Are you the right kind of woman? The right kind of immigrant? The right kind of American? The right kind of young black man? Because if you are not, our culture is ready to wash our hands of you. And that is an unstated but deeply lived doctrine of hell on earth. It runs contrary to every thread of the universalism at our core, a tradition that calls us to universally, uncategorically love the hell out of this world. You do not have to be a good enough young black man not to get shot on the street. You do not have to be the right kind of immigrant to deserve basic health care when you are dying. You do not have to be the right kind of girl not to be raped. You do not have to be good enough to deserve basic human rights. You do not have to earn safety. We are inherently enough. We do not have to prove it. Here in the readings.
Why not every man?
Why not every man?
Why not every man?
Why not every man?
my Lord, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel. Did my Lord deliver Daniel? So why not every man? Did my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel? Did my Lord deliver Daniel? So why not every man?
He delivered Daniel from the lion's den,
Jonah from the belly of the whale.
and the Hebrew children from the fiery furnace.
Then why not every man? Why not every man? Did my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel? Did my Lord deliver Daniel? So why not every man? Why not every man? So why not every man?
Who deserves to live? The question I posed in my sermon title is overly broad. We could devote a year's worth of sermons to it. Abortion and reproductive health, capital punishment, right to die, allocation of limited resources, pacifism, just war theory, a small sampling of topics that might be explored under the question, who deserves to live? Not having 52 hours to devote to the question right now, my interest today lies in the casual judgments we make and the ways they conflict with our Universalist values. I'll start by convicting myself. Back in college, in a sociology class, we engaged a classic lifeboat discussion. Or maybe it was a classic transplant discussion. That particular detail doesn't matter much either way. A situation was posed. A group of people, a single mom, a retired judge, a long-haul truck driver, an alcoholic, a professional athlete, a farmer, a five-star general, and a college student, perhaps. All need access to a limited resource without which death is likely or even inevitable, such as an organ transplant or a seat in a lifeboat when a ferry capsizes. Who gets the resource? Why? How do we reach a decision? As our discussion unfolded that day, a classmate suggested that the alcoholic be denied the limited resource. The professor gently challenged that easy choice. Ernest Hemingway, he said, drank excessively, famously so. By eliminating the alcoholic, you might be eliminating a gifted artist, a national treasure. Well, it must have been Lisa shows off what she knows and doesn't suffer fools gladly day, because I then challenged the professor. not at all gently or even respectfully. Yeah, and Hemingway blew his head off with a shotgun, so why squander the life-saving resource on someone who might just throw it away anyway? It was not my finest moment as a student, or a person of compassion, or a Universalist. My point was not without some validity, but it was also no more nuanced than the original suggestion that the alcoholic person be eliminated from contention, or my professor's suggestion that genius might be hidden in addiction and that genius might deserve special consideration. And nuance is precisely what makes the lifeboat dilemma or the transplant dilemma a dilemma. Most of us participating in this worship service are never going to be called to decide who makes it into a lifeboat or receives a transplant. Thank goodness we are never going to be called to make such decisions. But we make judgments and have the opportunity to respond to judgments, including judgments about who deserves to live, all the time, every day. Nancy MacDonald Ladd published her piece, Universalism in Practice, in 2015, adapting it from a sermon she delivered the summer before following the murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. She reposted it this week in weary outrage at attempts to put George Floyd on trial for his own murder. I'm grateful for her succinct and powerful application of our shared theology to tragic and shamefully repetitive flaws of our American society. I'm likewise grateful to Janet Ivanovich, who to my knowledge is not a Unitarian Universalist, for her keen observation of one of those tragic and shamefully repetitive flaws, and the way she gives sneaky voice to her critique by offering it space in her popular series of books that no one, including me, reads for their social commentary. Nancy MacDonald Ladd asks, what if Michael Brown did steal cigars? Janet Ivanovich's Stephanie Plum asks, so what if they were drug dealers? And I've been asking, though the question does not originate solely from me, what if they were sex workers, those 6 Asian women? Zhao Zhe Tang, Dao Yo Feng, Soon Chung Park, Hyung Chung Grant, Soon Cha Chim, Young A Yu. What if the other woman was a sex worker? Delana Ashley Gonzalez. What if the 2 men were sex workers? Paul Andre Michaels, who died, and Elcias Hernandez Ortiz, who survived. We know that Robert Aaron Long has said he targeted the spas where some of the victims worked and all of the victims were killed because they were places that contributed to his sex addiction. That statement immediately muddied the conversation around the murders. Family members, friends, well-intentioned social media posters across the country leapt to the defense of the murdered women. They weren't sex workers. They were good people, hard workers, mothers, wives, daughters. They were innocents. As if murder victims must have their right not to be murdered defended. So much is wrong about such reasoning, it is hard to know where to begin with the debunking. For one thing, there is a long, complex, racist, misogynistic history around fetishizing Asian women in our country, one that any responsible analysis of the shootings in Atlanta and society's response to the shootings must consider. A story on National Public Radio did just that, saying in part, for Yves Nguyen, an organizer for Red Canary Song, a New York City-based group that supports Asian sex workers and allies, for Nguyen, whether the women victims provided sex services is beside the point. To her, the gunman's target was clear and part of a history of race and gender-based violence against Asian women, immigrants, and sex workers. If these women weren't sex workers, the person who killed them certainly thought they were, Nguyen said in an interview with Weekend Edition's Lulu Garcia Navarro. It is a reality that some people who work in the massage businesses do engage in sex work, and obviously some people don't, she said. But the racist and fetishistic perceptions around women of Asian descent, she said, especially immigrant Asian women involved in low-wage work, make it so that people think they're sex workers anyway. If they were not Asian women, they probably wouldn't be viewed as sexual objects of desire, and they wouldn't automatically be assumed to be sex workers, Nguyen said. There's hatred for both sex workers and immigrants, and being Asian, and being women, and they all intersect. It would be irresponsible not to talk about all of these parts. As more information surfaces about the mass shooting, sex worker advocates like Nguyen are uneasy about how law enforcement and the news media might reinforce dehumanizing stereotypes of the victims and their work, considering the entrenched stigmas that exist around sex work and massage business. People want to be like, don't assume they're sex workers, because they think that there's shame attached to it, Nguyen said, even though we're simply naming the very expansive harm of criminalizing sex work and criminalizing immigrants. Say that one of those women was a sex worker. Then is that person meant to be shamed in their death? Would they have deserved it? The answer is no. Another problem with rushing to defend the character of victims of violent crime is that we know that innocence or purity or being good people does not save lives. Tamir Rice was 12 years old. 12 years old with a toy gun. 20 of the 28 people Adam Lanza killed in Sandy Hook, Connecticut were innocents. Innocents as young as 6 years old. 5 others were good people, teachers, administrators, school psychologists, and aides. Innocence doesn't prevent violent death. Being good people doesn't offer protection against murder. Our collective insistence on defending the character of murder victims out of a taste for sensationalism or in a misguided attempt to convey the depth and the breadth of our horror and dismay, in reality, this collective insistence serves mostly to divide people, as Nancy MacDonald Ladd points out, into 2 groups: those who can be dismissed and those whose lives and reputations and souls we must cherish and protect. Or in the language I've been using, to divide people into a group that deserves to live and a group that does not. Defending the character of some murder victims, the women killed last month in Atlanta, Justine Rushchek Diamond, Breonna Taylor, is inextricably linked to attacking the character of other murder victims, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, George Floyd. And no matter how well-intentioned our impulse to defend the character of victims of violent crime might be, it lands us in the same position as those who would attack the character of victims of violent crime. A position more morally precarious than simply asserting that there are 2 groups of people, those deserving to live and those deserving to die. The position of assuming that we have the knowledge, the wisdom, the right to be the arbiter of those two groups. I can't remember which recent horrific act, there are so many, prompted it. Which person voices in our society were declaring deserved to die, but some of my Unitarian Universalist ministerial colleagues have taken to saying that the details of universalism are above their pay grade. It's their way of reiterating and amplifying Nancy MacDonald Ladd's point. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, full stop. A belief, certainly, that does not harm us from wondering about some individuals, does not prevent us from passing judgment, does not prevent us from hating even. We are only human, after all. What our belief in universal salvation, in the inherent worth and dignity of all people does mean is that we don't get to decide. We don't have to bother ourselves with whether or not someone is worthy of God's love. We simply have to accept that they are. And we have to acknowledge that the details of how that is possible, given a long litany of truly awful things the person may have done or not done, those details are up to God, up to the love that holds us, the love that holds each and every one of us. Frankly, regrounding ourselves in this core theological belief should be a relief. We've got lots of arduous work in our hands in this moment in history. Noticing the ways we personally benefit from white supremacy society and choosing deliberately to divest ourselves from those benefits. Informing ourselves about global climate change and the choices we can make to reduce harm. Finding concrete ways to protect the most vulnerable among us when states are passing potentially life-threatening laws regarding the lives of trans children, youth, and adults. Girding ourselves legally and in the practice of collective action against the wave of voter suppression laws, likewise making their way through state legislative bodies. Engaging our local and state officials around addressing the inequities the pandemic has exposed. And, loving and caring for our families, readjusting to life outside our homes, fulfilling our individual personal responsibilities. Who has the time or the energy to busy themselves deciding who deserves to live? Let's give back to universal love the task of universal love. It's a simple question after all. Who deserves to live? You and sex workers and elementary school students and young black men in hoodies and drug dealers and everyone else. Amen. Let's say now in unison the words for extinguishing our chalice. The flame has been doused. The fire of our community still burns. In this moment, we become beacons on the prairie or in the city, bearers of light and warmth until we gather again to rekindle our communal chalice. We have a calling in this world. We are called to honor diversity, to respect differences with dignity, and to challenge those who would forbid it. We are people of a wide path. Let us be wide in affection and go our way in peace. Amen.